Lucas Miller leaned back in his leather chair, the skyline of Manhattan stretching endlessly outside his office window. At just 35, he had achieved what most could only dream of, a billionaire at the helm of a global investment empire. Yet, as he stared out at the glittering city, Lucas felt nothing. The wealth, the power, the acclaim, it all felt hollow, like a trophy collecting dust. For years, Lucas had dedicated his life to building his fortune, filling every waking moment with deals, mergers, and the relentless pursuit of success. But as the years passed, he realized that no amount of money could fill the void within him. The vibrant spark that once fueled his ambition had dimmed, replaced by a gnawing sense of emptiness. One evening, as he sat alone in his penthouse suite, Lucas scrolled aimlessly through property listings. His eyes stopped on a small ad for an old farm in Willow Creek, a picturesque village nestled in rolling hills and surrounded by vibrant green fields. The photos of the farm showed sprawling meadows, a weathered barn, and a rickety farmhouse drenched in golden sunlight. There was a simplicity to it that drew him in, a quiet beauty that felt like a world apart from the chaos of his life. On a whim, Lucas decided to buy it. As he stared at the photos of the serene fields and rustic barn, something stirred inside him, a longing he couldn't quite name, but one that felt like it had been buried for years. No board meetings, no lengthy deliberations, just a sudden, unshakable urge to leave everything behind and find solace in a place where time seemed to stand still. The next week he arrived in Willow Creek, the rumble of his sleek black car breaking the peaceful silence of the countryside. The air smelled of fresh grass and wildflowers, a stark contrast to the sterile scent of his city office. For the first time in years, Lucas felt like he could breathe. This, he thought, standing at the edge of his newly purchased land, might just be the beginning of something real. Lucas stood in the middle of his newly purchased farm, taking in every detail. The lush green fields stretched out under the warm sunlight. The old barn stood stoic in its weathered charm, and fruit trees lined the edges like guardians of the land. But the quiet serenity of the morning was soon interrupted by the sound of laughter and cheerful voices. "Don't forget to water the bushes behind the barn, Dad," a bright melodic voice called out from the distance. Lucas turned to see a young woman speaking to an older man near the barn. She was dressed simply, her brown hair tied loosely at the back of her neck. There was an air of effortless grace about her, a natural beauty that Lucas had never encountered in the fast-paced world he had left behind. The older man was Thomas, the gardener who had tended the farm for years, and the young woman was his daughter, Claire Thompson. Thomas approached Lucas with a firm handshake, introducing himself as the man who would help manage the farm. Claire, standing behind her father, gave Lucas a soft smile, her eyes flickering with a mix of curiosity and shyness as she studied him. At first, Lucas and Claire's interactions were limited to polite exchanges. To Lucas, Claire seemed like just another part of the farm's workforce, and Claire, in turn, kept her distance from the wealthy city man, who she thought could never understand the simple life of Willow Creek. Things began to change, however, when Lucas proposed modernizing the farm with cutting-edge technology to improve efficiency. Claire immediately objected. "This farm isn't just a place of work, it's a part of life here in Willow Creek," Claire said, her voice firm but tinged with vulnerability. "I know you mean well, but if you change everything, you risk stripping away the heart and soul of this land, the memories, the connection to nature, the peace it gives us." Lucas, initially taken aback by her resistance, began to see that Claire wasn't opposing him out of stubbornness, but out of genuine love for the farm. She had an intimate understanding of every corner of the land, every crop and tree. It was this passion and dedication that began to earn Lucas's respect in a way he hadn't felt for anyone in years. Claire wasn't just an ordinary gardener's daughter. She carried within her a deep love for this place, and Lucas started to realize that Willow Creek might hold more than just peace for him. It might also hold someone who could make his heart feel alive again. Life in Willow Creek wasn't easy for Lucas Miller at first. He had grown accustomed to sleek offices where everything ran like clockwork, and the quiet countryside often left him feeling out of place. But under the guidance of Claire and Thomas, he slowly began to immerse himself in the rhythm of life on the farm. Lucas surprised himself by taking initiative, waking up early to water the plants, asking Thomas about the best ways to plant vegetables in the damp soil, and volunteering to join the workers in harvesting fruit under the golden afternoon sun. He was surprised to discover that the same hands that once signed million-dollar deals could now find joy in holding a shovel, sowing seeds, or simply wiping sweat off his brow after a hard day's work. Claire was always by his side during those days, patiently guiding him and explaining how the farm operated. One afternoon, while they were fixing an old fence together, Lucas asked, "Have you lived here your whole life?" Claire nodded, her eyes lighting up as she recounted her childhood. "My mom died giving birth to me. My dad has worked here ever since, and this farm, it's all we've ever had." Her story moved Lucas deeply. Claire wasn't just working on the farm to earn a living. She was preserving the memories and values her family had built here. She had a bond with the land that Lucas couldn't help but admire. As the days passed, living and working alongside Claire, Lucas began to see that Willow Creek wasn't just a retreat. The fields, the trees, and the peaceful mornings had become part of his journey toward transformation. From a man who had spent his life chasing perfection, Lucas was slowly learning to embrace the beauty of simplicity. More importantly, Claire's dedication and kindness made Lucas realize that life wasn't about what he owned, it was about the connections he made. The relationship between Lucas and Claire began to shift during their days working together on the farm. Claire no longer saw Lucas as just a wealthy outsider, but as someone who genuinely wanted to understand and care for this land. As for Lucas, he found himself increasingly drawn to Claire's warmth and sincerity, qualities he had never encountered in his former life. Every morning, they would sit on the farmhouse porch, sipping steaming cups of coffee while gazing out over the vast fields. Claire, with her deep knowledge of the farm, often shared stories about the seasons, the crops, and the memories tied to the land. Lucas listened intently, captivated by the life and passion in her words. In the afternoons, they would walk together along the dirt paths winding through the farm. Their conversations, which started with work topics, gradually became more personal. Claire opened up about the struggles she had faced, losing her mother as a baby, growing up with a distant and reserved father, and her constant fear that she would never have the chance to live the life she truly wanted. "Have you ever felt like you didn't belong anywhere?" Claire asked one evening as they stood beneath the stars. Lucas was quiet for a moment before replying, "I used to think that money and success would help me find my place in the world, but now I realize having everything means nothing if you have no one to share it with." They stood in silence, but the connection between them grew stronger with every passing second. Lucas didn't know exactly when it happened, but Claire had become the most important thing in his life. On another evening, with the moonlight illuminating the land, Lucas turned to Claire and said, "I never thought I could feel this at peace. You've changed me, Claire." She looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of surprise and emotion. "You've changed me too," she replied softly. One morning, as Lucas and Claire were inspecting the garden, a sleek luxury car pulled into the farm's driveway. A man in a tailored suit stepped out, representing a major real estate corporation. He introduced himself and presented a proposal. His company wanted to buy the farm and turn it into a high-end resort, offering Lucas an astronomical sum in return. "All you have to do is sign and you'll make 10 times what you paid for this place," the representative said, his confidence unwavering. Lucas quietly studied the contract, but before responding, his eyes flicked to Claire. She stood a few steps away, her face pale and her expression a mixture of worry and disappointment. After the representative left, Claire finally spoke, her voice trembling. "What are you going to do? Sell the farm? If you do, this place will be gone forever. No more fields, no more memories, no more peace." Lucas remained silent for a long moment. He understood what Claire meant, and he could feel the deep love she had for the farm. But he also knew this was a chance to return to the world he once ruled, a world of luxury and power. For days, Lucas wrestled with his decision. Part of him wanted to leave, to go back to the life of prestige and ambition, but another part knew that Willow Creek had become home, and that Claire was the one person who made him feel whole. One evening, as they stood together under the golden hues of the setting sun, Lucas turned to Claire and said, "I've made my decision. I'm not selling the farm. No amount of money can replace what I've found here. I want to stay with you, with this life." Claire looked at him, her eyes brimming with emotion. "Lucas, thank you," she whispered, offering him a smile he knew he would remember forever. That evening, after Lucas made the decision not to sell the farm, Claire smiled softly and said, "There's something I want to show you. It's special." She took Lucas's hand, leading him out of the small house and toward the garden behind it. The night had settled over the land, but it wasn't dark. The moonlight spilled across the path, casting a gentle glow that made everything feel magical. When they reached the garden, Lucas stopped in his tracks, stunned by what he saw. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of fireflies lit up the night, their tiny lights floating and dancing through the trees and plants, like stars come to life. "This is where I come on summer nights," Claire said, her voice as soft as the breeze. "Seeing them makes me feel at peace. I wanted to share it with you." Lucas turned to look at Claire. In the dim, enchanting glow of the fireflies, her brown hair seemed to shimmer, and her eyes reflected a tenderness that made his heart race. "Claire," he whispered, stepping closer to her, "I came to Willow Creek to find peace, but you're the most beautiful thing I've found here." Claire looked up at him, her wide eyes shimmering with emotion. Lucas continued, "I never thought I could love anyone, but you changed everything. I love you, Claire. Nothing in this life will ever mean more to me than being with you." Claire bit her lip, her cheeks flushing as she held his gaze. After a moment of silence, she smiled and whispered, "I love you too, Lucas." Lucas didn't need to say another word. He leaned down and pressed his lips gently to hers, the kiss filled with tenderness and passion. Claire melted into him, her arms wrapping around his neck. They stood together, surrounded by the soft glow of the fireflies, as if nature itself was celebrating their love. That night, under the sparkling light of the fireflies and the canopy of lush green trees, Lucas and Claire gave themselves fully to each other, becoming one with the serene beauty of the world around them. Since Lucas confessed his love to Claire under the fireflies, their relationship had only grown deeper. The garden became their favorite spot, a sanctuary where they could escape the world and share their innermost thoughts. On many evenings, they sat side by side on the grass, listening to the soft hum of crickets and talking under the stars. "I used to think my life would always be about skyscrapers and endless work," Lucas said during one of those nights, his eyes soft as they rested on Claire. "But since I met you, I've realized that life's real meaning isn't in the things I used to chase." Claire smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I never thought I'd meet someone like you, Lucas. You've brought a kind of hope into my life I didn't even know I needed." Their conversations in the quiet garden became the heartbeat of their relationship. But one evening, Claire came to Lucas with a mysterious smile. "Lucas," she said, gently holding his hand, "I have something to tell you." Lucas frowned slightly, concern flickering in his gaze. "What is it, Claire?" Claire hesitated, her hands trembling slightly as she clasped them together. Then, with a deep breath, she looked up at Lucas, her eyes shimmering with emotion. "I'm pregnant," she said, her voice soft yet filled with a joy that seemed to radiate through the garden. Lucas froze for a moment, stunned, but then a wave of happiness broke over him. He stood, pulling Claire into his arms and spinning her around. "Are you serious?" he asked, his voice brimming with excitement. "I am," Claire laughed, tears glistening in her eyes. Without a second thought, Lucas knelt down, taking her hand in his. From his pocket, he pulled out a simple ring he had woven from grass a few days earlier in the garden. "Claire, you've changed my life in ways I never imagined. Now we're about to start a family. Will you marry me so we can build a life of happiness together?" Claire looked at Lucas, her eyes brimming with emotion. "Yes," she whispered, a radiant smile spreading across her face. A month later, Lucas and Claire were married at the farm. The green fields and vibrant flowers provided the perfect backdrop for their special day. Friends, neighbors, and the farm workers all gathered to celebrate with them. Claire wore a simple white dress adorned with wildflowers in her hair, while Lucas looked dashing in a modest yet elegant suit. They exchanged vows as the golden sunset bathed the land in its warm light. When Claire placed her hand on her growing belly, Lucas smiled and whispered, "From now on, everything is for our family."